Hello, I'm Dohren, and today I'm going to read and review Wasp in My Cockpit. Wasp in My Cockpit. There's a feisty wasp in my cockpit. It flew in through a barely open window, but is unable to find its way out again, even though the window is now fully open. A passenger gets on at Mitcheldean and alerts me to a woman over the road who's trying to get rid of a crow that's been following her all morning. "Do you know my mate Bob?" he asks. "He drives a bus in Cornwall." I toy with telling him I know Bob, but in the end I tell him I don't, and he seems disappointed. "Well, he works for Stagecoach," he adds. I glance at the woman over the road. She does indeed seem to be receiving unwanted attention from a crow and is trying to shoo it away. And I think, what would Jesus do? My mind drifts to that weird creature I saw wriggling and writhing on the surface of a pond in Newent. I laugh and I wonder what the hell is going through the crow's mind. I head for Gloucester, 1,000 concerns now rattling my brain. Not least of them is the wasp, but also a very real dread that on my break I'll get caught up in one of those awful flash mob things. It's only a matter of time. Already this year I've been called Martin by a stranger in a coffee shop, and I've demolished a bus shelter, the one that's right outside my flat, or rather the one that used to be right outside my flat until the council came along and scooped it up and took it away. I spoke at length to a therapist about it all and spent 40 minutes listening to his woes. What a waste of my fucking time that was. What would Jesus have done? Well, he'd have disappeared for 3 days and pretended he was dead, but I don't have the requisite skills. At Gloucester, the feisty wasp alighted. Thankfully there was no flash mob, so things were seriously looking up. Later that day I saw an old man walking up Wintergate Road with a spring in his step, enjoying the summer evening in this the autumn of his life. Too many odd things like that happen, and I think I've experienced enough synchronicities to suggest that Cornwall would be a good place to visit. If I go, I bet I'll bump into Bob and he'll ask me if I've ever driven through Mitcheldean, as there's a woman there who gets followed by a crow. What would Jesus do? Well, if I had his way with words, I'd relate to Bob a profound parable involving strange creatures that wriggle and writhe on the surfaces of ponds in Newent. Okay, there you have it. That's my first review of one of my bus driving poems. Kind of a straight sort of narrative of a typical day's happenings. Not everything happened on the same day. I have to come clean and admit that. But Wasp in My Cockpit is the title track of my second collection. There you go. There's the feisty wasp itself on the cover, and there's the woman being followed by a crow. Yeah, I mean, all those things really did happen. When you work with the general public, crazy stuff happens. So I really did see a woman being followed by a crow and trying to shoo it away, and this guy asked me if I knew his mate who worked hundreds of miles away, worked for the same bus company, but you know, that doesn't mean anything. And yes, as my workmates like to remind me, I really did demolish a bus shelter, accidentally of course, but these things happen, you know. I'd like to give a big shout out in this poem to Jesus. I want to talk about Jesus, but please don't switch off. A quick glance through some of my poetry, and he seems to pop up a few times actually. he features in a couple of poems which I would like to review on this channel at some point. He of course appears in Morty Vicar. The Church of England vicar inexcusably tries to bring him into the conversation at one point. And in Helena, he has allegedly appeared in a piece of toast at some point in the past. So yeah, he's everywhere. And I was unfortunate enough to have a strict Catholic upbringing, which, as anyone who's gone through the same will understand the lifelong burden that puts on your shoulders. But I always thought, when we were being told about Jesus, that the standout characteristic of him was how unflappable he always was. Nothing ever seemed to faze him, you know. He was just so chilled and cool in every situation. People would approach him and ask him for stuff, and he would just take it all in his stride. There's a story of a woman who had a dying relative who needed Jesus' attention, and she asked Jesus to come to the house and help, and he said yeah, and of course he took his time getting there, you know, and when he arrived, the guy had died. Well, no problem, you know, he just brought him back to life. And then there's the feeding of the 5,000. 5,000 of his followers, they were starving and there was no food. So he just miracled up some food for them. And I admit, when you can turn your hand to miracles, it does make things a lot easier. And that would make you a bit more chilled, I guess. But even so, he was always this unflappable character. Very often he dealt with situations with a witty put down or a clever comment, and nothing really concerned him, you know. So when I say what would Jesus do, I'm not being facetious in any way. I don't ask that question enough when I'm faced with stresses and difficulties in work. Jesus would be an incredibly good bus driver, I'm sure of it. Just regarding that last remark, I think if they gave him the 746, he might have to fall back on some miracles though, especially when he was doing his route learning. The strange creature wriggling and writhing on the pond was a bizarre thing that I witnessed, and it was not connected to being on the buses at all. This was just one day when I was out walking near where I live, and I just saw this strange thing on the pond. It was bright white, and it was kind of maybe an inch or so long. It was worm-like, and it was wriggling, and I thought it was, whatever it was being eaten from by something inside the pond. It looked like it was fighting something off. I just couldn't understand what it was, and I got a long stick and I reached over, and eventually I was able to just touch this thing, and it completely disintegrated and fell apart and just disappeared, as we all will one day. But I have no idea to this day what it was, but there you go. It deserved a mention in the poem. That's it anyway for today's offering. I hope you enjoyed Wasp in My Cockpit. If you haven't subscribed or liked, please do so, because it all helps apparently, and I will see you again very soon. So stay tuned and take care. Bye now. Thank you.